Hello and welcome to Midwest Writers Room. Our mission is to encourage, educate, and celebrate writers of the Midwest. I'm Luella Schmidt.
And I'm Ken Humphrey. Today's chapter break episode features Richard Sweitzer in his debut novel, Ode, The Scion of Nerikan.
Richard is an award-winning writer and longtime morning radio host. He received his Master of Arts degree in creative writing from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. Prior to that, he studied English literature and creative writing at UW-Stevens Point, winning the English Department Award, the Letters and Science Award, and the Ellen Specht Memorial Award, all while graduating summa cum laude. Richard also hosts a popular morning radio show in central Wisconsin. His decades-long tenure in radio has earned him numerous broadcast awards and significant recognition for his public service. He is also a joke writer for a world-famous comedian.
Wow, I'm going to have to
I
see if I can
know.
extract a few jokes out of that. So let's take a quick look at Ode, The Scion of Nerikan. An immortal monster searching for a way to die, and the little girl who gives him a reason to live. At its most basic, that describes the heart of the story in Ode. And while those two characters and their quests dominate the pages, it's the friends and foes they meet along the way that truly flesh out their story. This emotional, character-driven adventure has been described as a gateway book for those who have never read fantasy, and has been praised for its writing style and literary merit, including earning a prestigious Stars review by Kirkus Reviews.
Very cool. Welcome, Richard, to Midwest Writers Room. We're so thrilled to have you. How are you doing today?
Thank you. I am fine. I'm glad to be here.
Oh, we are absolutely thrilled to have you on. We're going to dive into the book in a second, but before we do that, we always take a pass on the author themselves, right? Let's dig a little bit into Richard and who you are, where you came from. I'm going to start first with why a fantasy novel? Is that your go-to genre to read? I mean, how's that come about?
It wasn't. It actually wasn't. I grew up, everybody bulks together fantasy sci-fi, but I grew up exclusively reading science fiction and watching it on TV. I grew up in the era of the first Star Wars movies and Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica and just the books of Isaac Asimov and all of the other famous sci-fi guys. But that changed. I think even most science fiction readers dabbled a little bit in fantasy, and for me, it was Lord of the Rings, as so many people did, and I really loved that. But it really wasn't until the Lord of the Rings films came out that I kind of became more of an obsession level, and I discovered writing very late in life. And when I did, my mind just went to fantasy and Lord of the Rings and books like that. So that's what I ended up writing, and that's what comes naturally to me.
Very nice. I also grew up, I would probably more on the fantasy side, but also science
Mhm.
fiction. Like you said, there's a lot of crossover. So,
Mhm.
and because I grew up reading that, even though I don't read much fantasy anymore, I always like to ask, I'm maybe putting you on the spot here, but setting aside the giants like the Heinleins, the Asimovs, the Tolkiens, is there an under the radar fantasy or sci-fi book that you think everybody should read, but nobody knows about?
Since I got into fantasy a little late in life, I actually am still just reading all the big guys. They're still new to me. So I haven't really read anybody who's flying under the radar. With that said, since my book came out and local Wisconsin author, and I started doing the circuit, I started going to book fairs and book signings, and I went anywhere in the state that they would have me. I got to read a lot of small press authors like me or indie authors like me. Um, and there's a lot of really good ones out there. And I could give you a list of about 50 names right now of Wisconsin fantasy authors who are flying under the radar. So I would start there. Just look within your own state. Yeah.
Fair enough. And nice, yeah, nice shout out for the Wisconsin folks. Way to go, Richard. So you already mentioned you landed late in life in writing.
Yeah.
What was that trigger? What was that Rubicon moment that said, "Hey, I want to start writing"?
I went to college. I was always a reader, but I never had any aspirations for being a writer. I never dreamed of it. If I fantasized about something in the arts, I thought I would be like a rock star or a movie star or something. That's when I was young. But I went to college. I went to UW Stevens Point, and I was 31 years. I was 31-year-old freshman, and I was already working at the radio station full time. I had a good job that I really liked, but I never had that degree. and I wanted that degree. So I went after work every day, and I could only take classes. I was pursuing an English literature degree, but I could only take afternoon classes. And one semester, the only class that fit my schedule was Intro to Creative Writing, and I took it reluctantly. And I still remember that first day where I got the syllabus, and the final project was like write a 3 to 5 page short story, and I almost dropped the class. I couldn't imagine how I could stretch out a narrative for 5 pages. And now I have this 140,000 word fantasy adventure. And I have said this in other interviews, and it is true. I wasn't given God's gift to writing. I was taught. I was taught by good teachers. And it started at UWSP, Stevens Point. I got very lucky when I went there. I was there in this golden age where some people who have since gone on to be the world's most famous writers were teaching class. That's where Patrick Rothfuss was a professor before his book, Name of the Wind, sold like 20 million copies worldwide. The one I learned the most from was a guy named Ben Percy, who I give all the credit to. His was the writing class, the first class and probably the only class I'd ever been in college, where he said, write fantasy, write sci-fi, write anything you want. Because every other writing class I had, they said, no elves, no monsters, no robots. You need to write a human story about love, life, death, stuff like that. But Ben Percy allowed us to write fantasy, and that's where I really honed my craft. Ben Percy has since gone on to greatness. He is now one of the main writers for Marvel Comics, and he writes Deadpool and Wolverine and several others. And he started at UWSP. So.
Yes, as a Marvel Comics fan, I did recognize the names. Thank you for tying it together. I wasn't sure if it's the same guy. Mm-hmm. So for your debut novel here, then, how did this story come about, right? This whole plot line, how did it come about to you?
It came about because I was simply reading another book, and I don't know what it was, and it wasn't good. And my mind was drifting. And I was drifting off into daydreaming. And it started with this image, if we can see it. I just had this image of a little girl on the shoulder of this friendly ogre, and they were on a journey somewhere. And I didn't know where the journey was, so I started writing it down. And I'm sure you know the difference between what they call plotters and pantsers. I prefer plotters or discovery writers. I'm a discovery writer. I didn't know where the story was going, so I just started writing, and I just kept writing at it. And to my surprise, it came together. Into a total story. Yeah.
I really love the fact that you called your book a gateway book for those who have never read fantasy. Can you share a sentence or two about what you mean when you say that?
Yeah. So when my book came out, I was contacted by a lot of people, and they all said the same thing, that I've never read fantasy, but I love your book, and I need to read more. I want to read more. So yeah.
Okay, so tell us about, I noticed that the word ode in the title is capitalized, and I was wondering if there was any significance to that.
Yeah, there is significance. It's just my preference. The title, so I self-published this book, but I originally wanted to do it traditional, go the traditional route, find a literary agent and get it published, have them sell it to a publisher. And I did. I signed with a very well-known literary agency out of San Francisco, and they hated the title Ode. They hated it. In fact, because when I first wrote the book, it was just called Ode, O-D-E, and I pictured large, big block letters, Ode. And they said, we are not going to publish this book with that title. So they came up with the subtitle, the Scion of Nerikan. And so when I ended up self-publishing it anyway, I thought, I still like my original title, and I still see in my mind, I just saw these big block letters on the cover. But I'm like, they're in the industry, even though I don't like their subtitle. As much as I love my book, I don't like their subtitle. I've thought, they're in the industry, I'm going to combine them. And that's where the title came from.
Yeah. Can you share a little more about your path to publication and kind of that roadblock that you felt like you bumped into?
Yeah. So what happened there is I always want to step lightly when I tell this story because I they didn't do anything wrong. The agency, they were doing what they needed, and it was a very long process. And when they first signed on to represent my book, they offered suggestions for change, and I accept that. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's good. And when we first started this process for editing, we had a very good back and forth, a very good 50-50. They would say, we suggest this, we suggest that, and maybe this change. And at first I was able to say, that's a good idea, I'll do that, but I really think that this is important to keep in there. But as the writing process and the editing process went on, over the course of a few years this took, I found myself saying yes to more and more things I didn't believe in. And because I was getting desperate, I'm like, fine, I just want to get this thing published. And I remember the very last request, and they said, this is it, this is the last thing, and then we're ready to go. And they said, reduce dialogue by 50%. And I did it. And dialogue is one of the things I think I write best. So I reduced dialogue by 50%. And for the first time ever, because I keep my manuscripts hidden away, I don't let anybody read them. I let a friend read it. And I didn't tell him why. And he read it, and he got back to me, and he said, I really like it, but why is there no dialogue?
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Talk about instant feedback.
Yes. So that's when I realized I don't want that book out there. I want this book. And so I took a few months to try and put it back as much as I could to closer to my original. And it came out, and I am so glad it won a lot of awards, and it got that Kirkus starred review because I felt justified.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, I would have still loved for a literary agency to sell it to Penguin or Random House or something. But as far as the literary side of things, I'm glad it all panned out in the end.
Yeah, it's an interesting path that you took. And I wonder how many other writers, it sounds like a similar story that we've heard from time to time, Ken.
Yeah, you accept a certain amount of editing. You accept a certain amount of editing. And some of the things they told me, I thought made sense. But in the end, they need to make what they thought was a marketable book, a profitable book. And at some point, it stopped being anything close to what
that being your book. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the hard things too, especially when you're a newer writer, is you don't know where that line is between I got to preserve my creative vision versus listening to industry professionals trying to make the book better. It's a hard line to find, I think, for very, very many writers.
Yep, for sure. And then I understand that you had the Mustard Museum's help in launching your writing career. Do you want to tell us that story?
Yeah, so people in Wisconsin know this. It's an icon, but it was originally in Mount Horeb, and now it's in Middleton, I believe. This is when I started writing in college, and I started liking it. I'm like, this is interesting. So I remember one day after class, I don't know where I was online, and I saw that the Mustard Museum had a writing contest, and it was a nationwide contest. They wrote chapter 1 of a murder mystery, and mustard was the theme. And they said they opened it up to anybody. You write the second chapter and a synopsis, and if they'll read all of the options, and the one that they choose will win $5,000, and they will publish the book. You finish the book, they'll publish it. So I wrote my chapter, I wrote my synopsis, I sent it off, forgot about it. Like 4 months later, I got the phone call that I had won the grand prize. And I started to think, oh, wow, maybe there is something to this writing career, So I went down there, they got the big check, which I forgot I should have had ready for this interview because I still have it today. It's many years later. I have the big giant check. They never did finish publishing the book, which is fine because by then I was working on my own stuff. So
sure. So it's a good
thank you, Mustard Museum.
It's one of the leftover publisher clearinghouse checks. That's the size of a sheet of plywood.
It is. It's yellow, and it's this big. It's really big. So
I feel like nobody ever throws out a giant check that they receive.
Exactly.
would.
That was really the launch of my career. Had I not won that, I might not have had the confidence to move on.
Yeah, I
And
really
they
love that.
told
That's
me,
really
they
cool.
said they had like 500 entries, they said. So
Wow.
I felt really good about it. Yeah.
I love it. Our confidence gets boosted in unusual ways, and we take it whenever
Yes.
it happens.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Well, we are up to the reading portion of our podcast here. So Richard is going to share a little bit about, is going to read a little bit from Ode, the Scion of Nerikan, whenever you're ready, and orient us where you're starting so we understand.
All right. I'm going to start on, by the way, please don't edit this out. One quick shout out to my buddy Patrick, who did my cover. Patrick is a Wausau guy. He did this amazing cover, and I absolutely love it. All right. Now if I may read. I'm going to read from chapter 2. Chapter 1 is just the longest chapter of the book, and there's too much going on. So I'm going to start with chapter 2, where we meet our hero. Chapter 2, The Silver Honor. Deep underground, where the hidden mechanisms of a clockwork city clacked and clanged, a young girl floated on her back in swirling waters. Everyone in Eisen knew about this city built upon a river, its fast-flowing waters powering the countless gears and levers above. But only Olin Marine had sniffed out this pool room with its own crashing waterfall. The 12-year-old was supposed to be cleaning with her sisters, but she had once again found chores impossible to do while an entire underworld demanded exploring. She kicked an arc of water high into the room. The city was Milthrace, and she floated far below the boardwalk of the wealthy borough known as Uptown. Girls like her were not welcome upriver, but she was not in Uptown. She was underneath it. Sunlight poked through the slats of the boardwalk high above, and muted footsteps echoed below, as rich folk meandered above in hoof-heeled shoes, with no particular place to go and in no great hurry to get there. She pulled herself along, her arms slow churning water wheels, also in no great hurry to be anywhere but here. City engineers called this dark underside the escapement. Olin wasn't sure what that word meant, but it seemed to make sense because it was both a basement and an escape. She and everyone else just called it the scape. She swam to a ladder-like iron pylon that rose to the boardwalk and pulled herself onto the first riser. She stood on the wooden plank that spanned the pylon's legs. The iron was gritty with red rust that coated her palms. Her mother would want her to be clean, so she splashed her hands in the pool. She dove back into the swirling pond, kicking and pulling herself along before letting the waters wash her back to the pylon. She had told her sisters about the room with the waterfall, but it had not mattered. Even Clara, always eager for a little mischief, refused to enter the scape. She had believed the rumors of the ghouls that haunted the sewers, waiting for wayward young to enter their dark burrow. All Olin had ever seen down here were rats, and all you have to do to them is kick them aside. Rats learn pretty quickly in the scape. She pulled herself back onto the riser and climbed higher this time, diving right back in. The water smacked her forehead and she surfaced quickly, rubbing her scalp. Higher, she thought playfully, and climbed up to the third riser in the dark chamber. The room was a forgotten vault, a derelict of bad construction. She had discovered it 3 weeks earlier after exploring a recently repaired brick sewer she had named Big Boy. The back wall of the room was the blasted face of the Rook Rat Mountains, with the waterfall and an occasional wayward trout flowing over the top. It was also the back end of Uptown, the borough highest up the mountain. Atop the waterfall, there was a gap between the boardwalk and the cliff. Iron water wheel fins churned in the stream, casting spray below. To her left and right stood mortar and stone walls, windowless and forever drenched and covered in greenish-brown lichen. The shorter fourth wall behind her was not a wall at all, but a series of tunnels flowing downriver, including the only one she could pass through without crouching. Big Boy. She stood on the edge of the pylon and dared herself to dive. 3 levels high. She had never jumped in from this height before, and her forehead still stung from the last dive. She was halfway to the ceiling and much too high. She could be knocked silly and drift senselessly into the drains, tumbling through the Milthray sewers, either a floater or a bung plug. Bung plugs were the unlucky folk who not only fell through one of the many chutes and wells above, but whose bloated corpses stopped up a narrow drain backing up the river. The people of Milthrace had no regard for bung plugs who flooded their shops and homes with sewer water. No one mourns a bung plug, the Lowtowners said. She would rather be a floater. Floaters simply passed right through the scape until their lifeless bodies flowed out by the barons of Lowtown, like drowned rats. She imagined her father finding her and falling to his knees. "Damn it!" a man shouted above the boardwalk, halting her morbid daydream and sending her wobbling on the beam. Chance swears from above meant one thing only. An uptowner had dropped something through the uneven boardwalk and into her world, and offering to the mechanic, as they said. The louder the swear, the more valuable the offering. And that was a rather loud swear. A quick glint and a tiny splash. It had dropped right into the plunge pool below the falls. Standing higher than she ever had before, the small girl curled her toes over the edge. "Sorry, Mom. Sorry, Dad," she said, and dove straight into the falling waters.
Very nice.
So a lot of info, a lot of information there.
Yeah.
A lot of understanding
Chapter 2.
about her life and her place in the world. I love the louder the swear,
Yeah.
the more valuable the offering. That was great.
Yep.
True statement in any world.
Yes.
So tell our viewers and listeners where they can find your book and where they can find more about you.
Thankfully, the book is literally available almost anywhere in the world, from mom and pop indie bookstores to big online retailers to your classic Barnes and Noble. It's available almost everywhere.
Do you have a website, social handles?
Yes, it's my name, Richard Sweitzer, Sweitzer, richardsweitzer.com. Easily Googleable at this point, and on Facebook and that. I'm not a super active social media guy, but yeah.
All right, and we'll throw the link down in the show notes. Any appearances or book signings coming up for you?
I hope so, because I just found out that 2026 Independent Bookstore Day lands on my birthday this year, April 25th. So I guess I'm going to have to go find, find an independent bookstore and do some signings somewhere. But otherwise, yeah, no, I don't have anything scheduled right now.
All right, very cool. Well, we'll keep an eye on your site for any of those signings coming up. So at this time, I want to thank Richard for coming on and taking time to introduce everybody to his debut novel, Ode, the Scion of Nerikan. Thanks to everyone for hanging out with us in the Midwest Writers Room. I'm Ken Humphrey.
And I'm Luella Schmidt. Words ignite imaginations and spark change. Never underestimate the power of storytelling.
Midwest Writers Room is a production of the Wisconsin Writers Association. Writing and editing by Luella Schmidt and Ken Humphrey. Sound design and editing by Ken Humphrey. Music for the Midwest Writers Room was written by Michael Ramirez C. For more information, please visit wiwrite.org/podcast. Thank you.